Well, good evening again, everybody. Welcome back. Good to see you all again. So who's on the conference phone?
Hello?
Yeah, who's there?
It's Anya.
Anya's there. Who else is there?
And Dulcie and Bud are here.
Okay, good. I guess Helen and Kenny aren't here yet. Okay.
They're probably muted. I know they were both coming.
Couple of things. The audio recordings and next week's text will always be at the same place on the website, so I'm not going to be sending out announcements every Monday or Tuesday reminding you of where it is. You know where it is now. It's not secret, so you can all find that. And I will do the audio tomorrow and put it up there. Typically it'll go up on Tuesday, and typically I'll get the text up there by Friday or Saturday, and for sure by Sunday. So you can just do that. Those of you who have AOL aren't getting the mail anyway, because AOL doesn't accept mail for some reason. They're having a terrible time there. I get endless messages from them saying service is not available. So. I was really sort of happy with what happened last week. I think this is going to work, this style of reading the book, reading around and everything. I thought the energy was really good, and I got a lot of good feedback. And lots of people seem to be actually relieved to have somebody actually say that for most people in this world, God doesn't work, and prayer doesn't work, and Orthodox religion doesn't work. I know it's surprising for somebody to actually come out and say that, but some people seem to be relieved to hear that. It is going a little slower than I thought it might, which is good. I don't really care how slow it gets, except that I would like it to be done by the end of August, get done before the new series of stuff starts in September. So for that reason, and also just because I don't want to miss 2 weeks in a row, I'd like to suggest that we do have a class on Monday, July 4th. Now, how many of you could not make it on Monday evening, July 4th? Okay, so we won't have a class. I won't be here on the 11th, and I sort of hate to go 2 weeks, like they might lose some energy, but we'll just see what happens. So we won't. We'll continue to not have a class on July 4th. So let's see. We're about 2/3 of the way through the emptying out chapter. And we mentioned, just to get back in touch with where we are, we discussed emptying out intellects, God, prayer, Orthodox religion, and matter. And there's a few more topics that we can cover tonight there, and then we'll move into chapter 2. And I think we'll just do it the same way we were. We'll just read around the room. If you have any questions or you want to say anything, just speak up or raise your hand or whatever. You ladies on the conference call, just jump in because I can't see your hands. We'll discuss whatever comes up. So let's start. We're on page 14, Human Conditioning.
Okay, this is all of you guys. Human conditioning. Human consciousness, of course, is absolutely certain about all of these conceptual questions. Human consciousness has conditioned us thoroughly with these beliefs: that there is a God and it's worthwhile to pray, that churches are enlightening their congregations, that matter is real and solid. Human consciousness is convinced that everything we've said here so far is pure nonsense. Spiritual truth is always completely opposite to human belief, and we are conditioned from birth to believe what human consciousness believes.
This work is very hard work. Very few of us have any idea of the extent and depth to which we have been conditioned. Joel points 3 more human conditionings that have to go if we are to attain spiritual consciousness. The first is a belief in more than one power. If there is an infinite God that is omnipotent, then there is no power left over for anything else. Yet deeply ingrained in human consciousness is the belief that innumerable other things have power. Germs have power, earthquakes have power, fire has power, tidal waves have power, bombs have power, bullets have power, the law has power, medications have power. In human consciousness and a society that claims to believe in one omnipotent God, there is an ingrained belief in an almost infinite number of powers other than God. Hence, we wind up with God doing battle against the devil, against disease, against all these other powers, and not doing a very good job of battling. If somebody is sick, we may pray for them, but we don't take them out of the hospital because big medicine has the power to help them. We're really just using God as the backup in case the medicine doesn't work. We certainly don't trust that the matter is in God's hands and the disease has no power.
This is Jim. So consider whether you believe things have power or God is omnipotent. You can't have both. The second human conditioning is judgment. All the judgments we make about things. Not only is there a deep-seated belief in more than one power in human consciousness, there's also belief in good and evil and in all the other dualisms. One of the identifying features of human consciousness is dualistic thinking. If there's good, there has to be bad. If there's tall, there has to be short. If there's fat, there has to be thin. Every condition implies its opposite. When we call something beautiful, we create ugly. But all these conditions are in our mind. They're not real conditions. A person may be tall standing next to a short person, but then they're short next to a taller person. A person is bad until what's socially acceptable changes, and they're good. If I belch after dinner, here I'm rude. But if I do it in some other places, I'm applauding the cook. For everything we think is good, we can find someone who thinks it's bad. For everything we think is bad, we can find someone who thinks it's good. Every attribute we ascribe to something is relative, and we may find ourselves ascribing the opposite attribute to it momentarily.
Lee,
Yeah.
in the context of what was just read, can you speak to the statement that says spiritual truth is always completely opposite to human belief?
Sure. Human belief is rational and logical and is dealing with matter and dealing with things, and it has verbs in it. And the entire human language determines that it's inexpressible to tell the truth, because you can't, to speak truth, you wouldn't be allowed to use any nouns or verbs, because, there is no one separate. So if we say, if we make a statement like, we'll get into a lot more of this later, but if we make a statement like, God is good, then immediately we're implying some separate entity that's describable called God and some feature called good that we can ascribe to it. And, we're in logic and we're in rational thought. And if we deal with things spiritually, which we'll see, as I say in the next chapter, it's never true. The fact that there is no matter, obviously, is something that's contrary to human consciousness, even though science proves that there's no matter. And the fact that prayer doesn't work is contrary to human consciousness, even though there's no evidence that it does. It's just human consciousness is not rational sequential thought. Human consciousness is just an ingrained set of beliefs that are false.
Just the concept of human belief implies it's just a concept anyway, doesn't it? Because you're believing
and it implies there's a human.
Right.
You believe it, a separate human. The whole structure of human thinking, and this will become especially clear in the chapter we're getting to tonight when we talk about the difference between material consciousness and mental consciousness and spiritual consciousness. You'll see more of this, but if you're thinking that it's not spiritual, is the bottom line.
Everything we can get our our verbiage around has been conceptualized and therefore can only be a piece of what is.
That's right. So go on, all these people.
This is Tricia. All these dualities are labels that we add to what's here. That's where is a person, but tall or short, beautiful or ugly, good or bad, is all added by our minds. Joel calls these additions judgments, and because of all our judgments, we don't see what's there. We believe our judgments, so that's what we see, hence judgments have to go. The third and deepest conditioning in human consciousness is self-preservation, the belief that we need to take care of ourselves at any expense, at anyone's expense. This belief keeps us locked into the material human concepts of ourselves. It prevents us from seeing our spiritual being. The self we are preserving is not who we are, it's the human experience we're trying to stop identifying with.
Get that? Realize how deeply ingrained self-preservation is, survival of self. I mean, it's what 100,000 years of genetic selection have been about self-preservation, if you buy that story. And the problem is that that self you're trying to preserve is exactly the one that has to go in order for you to realize your oneness with God, because the one that's one with God is not the one that's out there surviving.
What's the difference between self-preservation and taking care of yourself?
None. One may be a bit more extreme than the other, but they're both taking care of your individual self, which is separate from God. And I know you're thinking about kid work and stuff, but this is beyond kid work.
Now is a good time to begin examining these conditionings, to see clearly how deeply entrenched they are, to understand how poorly they are serving us, and to pour them out.
This is Lisa. The causes of suffering. Obviously, it's a very tall order to empty all of these things out. The good news is that every time we give up a lie, we can hear something new. As we hear more truth, we are able to empty out more lies. It's progressive. We don't have to empty the teacup completely before we can begin putting new tea in. It's more like a glass full of muddy water. As we pour clear water in, the muddy water overflows, and the what remains is diluted and clearer. What remains.
Mm-hmm.
Finally, we are all probably quite willing to empty out of our cup all the causes of human suffering.
Patanjali, the author of the Yoga Sutras, has 5 causes of human suffering. 1, ignorance. Ignorance of truth leaves us completely impotent. Jesus said, "Know the truth, and the truth will set you free." Know is the operative word there. This chapter has been about emptying out our ignorance. Egotism, the idea that we are individual selves separate from God and each other, needing to take care of ourselves, locks us into the human experience, this human experience. Attraction. 3. Being attracted to anything, desiring, trying to acquire things, and then hang on to them. This keeps us in the human experience because the things we are attracted to are material, not spiritual. 4. Aversion. The opposite side of the attraction coin, trying to avoid bad or painful things. 5. The fear of death. It's based in the belief that we are these human experiences rather than spiritual beings, that we are therefore separate and finite. Robert is a lot more succinct. Robert says that the cause of all suffering is the I thought. The small I indicates that the I thought refers to the personal sense of self, not what we sometimes call the big I, the I am. Everything perceived through the 5 senses is attached to the I thought. Egotism, the idea that there is an I, is just a thought. It is this I who is ignorant, attracted, aversive, and afraid. If we eliminate the I thought, all 5 of Patanjali's causes are eliminated.
Joel says the cause of suffering is the belief in good and evil, the belief in more than one power, the belief that there are powers separate from God that can cause all this suffering. This belief in duality is the root cause of the human experience.
Barbara gives us a very useful tool. If we make a list of everything we love, hate, desire, and fear, we wind up with a list of all things that are tying us to our humanhood, not too far from attraction, aversion, and fear of death.
So that's the end of the emptying out. Very long list. Please.
I don't know which tape or in what context, but Barbara, some of her tape talks about our mind or it being the devil. She refers to the devil. So how does that fit into these studies? If there is no duality, if there's a
when she uses the word devil, is referring to human consciousness. And we'll get to that in the chapter on what appears to be later on, but all these beliefs in two powers and good and evil and all this stuff and all these temptations to get out there and take care of ourselves and follow all our conditioning, all of that is thoughts that are running around in human consciousness, and that's the devil. Who was that guy, Flip Wilson, used to say the devil made me do it? He was right. It's the constant, omnipresent devil of universal consciousness that's talking us into doing this stuff. So she's just talking about human consciousness.
And then she also talks about, thanking God for whatever opportunity, whatever script event, whatever is presented to you to work through whatever you're working through. But if that doesn't exist, like in the studies, what we've read last week and this week, that doesn't fit in.
You have to worry about where you're working. And this chapter that's coming up right now about the levels that we're working at, if you her difficulty was that she had been teaching these people for 25 years, and they were all attaining very high meditations and knew a great deal of spiritual truth and understood about non-duality and understood about oneness, and they'd get high in class, and then they'd go home, and their husband or their wife would say something to them, and they'd stomp their feet and go into a meltdown, And the fact was that they weren't done doing the other work. So we need to not only understand spiritual truth as one of our tools for attaining mystical experience, but we also need to clean up the stuff that's holding us here. And the stuff that's holding us here, which underlies all the scripts, are the lies in human consciousness that are being broadcast to us. They're all based in fear, and fear is all based in separation from God and powers other than God and all these things. So the fact that we're having script events means that we haven't emptied out our cup. And these words, all these words that we're saying are the finger pointing, remember. It's not the truth, it's just the finger pointing at the truth. We need to. But these are all things that have to go before we can have the mystical experience. We have to drop fear. And that's just an incredible statement to make. We just have to drop all our fears. That's it. Just drop all your fears.
Please. And so when I think about the difference between, and I might be wrong here, Robert and Osho spent many years kind of, from what I understand, studying and working his way into this high mystical consciousness, whereas for Robert it happened at 14, suddenly. He hadn't done any work by 14, I'm assuming in this lifetime. So, I don't know why I'm even asking this, but, so obviously he had done the work before. And
Osho.
Okay, and they just came back
Osho was struck
as different types of teachers? Is that what?
Osho was struck enlightened at 21.
Okay.
Just struck enlightened, And but the body that became enlightened was entirely different. And Robert's talking to 25 people, and Osho's talking to 4,000.
Okay.
So Osho's a chat and a gossip and everything. All they're trying to, both of them are just trying to have you come into the consciousness and sit there in the presence, which is the most powerful tool for becoming enlightened there is sitting in the presence of the enlightened master, And Osho used to tell dirty jokes, to keep the crowd entertained, just so they'd sit there with him, So the thing that's different is the students.
Okay.
But Osho also said that everyone can become enlightened if you do the work. Everyone can.
Mm-hmm. But I don't know what to base that on. I mean, obviously, everybody must eventually, but not this lifetime. I mean, it's like saying, let's pray for peace. You know, I mean, trying for 5,000 years and it hasn't worked yet. You know, and you look around Osho and you know, he's got 5,000 people in front of him 20 years ago when I was there. How many of them do you think are enlightened?
No, I hear you, but it doesn't serve me to think that way. It serves me to believe that I'm just.
No, it serves you not to believe that you're sure things become enlightened. It serves you to drop the I thought.
He talks
That
about
believes
that.
it's unenlightened.
In one of his tapes, where he talks about Lao Tzu laughing, I think it is, he talks about that. Eventually we have to drop that, but on the path to that point, it serves us to have some expectancy, and then eventually you have to drop the expectancy.
Or not.
Or not. But otherwise we could sit on the couch saying that, you know, well, if it's another lifetime, then I'll just, you know, let it happen in another lifetime, I won't do the work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you might get struck enlightened with that realization right in that moment.
Yeah.
One of my favorite Zen posters Zen master Iku got enlightened when a crow cawed. You know? Yes.
If we were to eliminate the I thought and all of the causes of suffering, does that mean and we have a mystical experience, does that mean we no longer love? Yeah. Because Barbara says that.
No, okay, yeah, good question. The question is, do we have to stop loving? She's referring to human love. She's referring to all this goal-oriented, not.
So there's a love that is spiritually.
But see, if I love something, I'm separating myself from God. If I love something, I have just become this independent, small, personal sense I. It's the I thought. It's Robert's little I thought. If I'm loving, it's the I thought. When there's no Lee, then there's lots of love here, because God loves through me. Okay? The only love there is God, is divine love, God love. That's the only love there is. Everything else, and it gets expressed through us. I mean, there's also no divine love stuff out there that you know. I mean, the fact is, divine love gets expressed through this expression. But if it's God loving, it's cool, and if it's me loving, I'm separating myself from enlightenment.
So in that sense, do you love everybody then? And if you dislike somebody, you're separating yourself from God as well.
And if I love everybody, I'm separating myself.
Yeah.
If everybody is loved here, then everybody's loved here.
So it's not
Interesting point.
loving someone, it's just
An interesting point is that Osho used to laugh at us and say, what makes you think you'll know when you're enlightened? Yeah, the fact is, if there's a me here, there's not enlightenment, because me is the problem, okay? Me is the little I. If there's Lee and enlightenment are mutually exclusive. Lee loving and enlightenment are mutually exclusive. Lee doing good and enlightenment are mutually exclusive.
So what I hear you saying is love has no object. There's no object.
Right, and no substance. Yeah. Cool.
I'm like confused now. So is it like no doing bad things either?
Well, I mean, there certainly are lots of people doing bad. We'll get to that later on. Let's don't try to answer that one quick and dirty. Yeah, doing bad things and doing good things are absolutely no different to the spiritually enlightened. And it doesn't seem that way, and that's why there's a chapter coming up down the pike a ways called What Appears to Be. Let's move on to the next chapter. This chapter, the last chapter and this one coming up are the two chapters of background material, and then the following chapter we're really going to get into it. So this is all lightweight stuff. So 3 levels of human consciousness. Whoever's next, please start reading.
Hi, I'm Janet. And the three levels of human consciousness. To understand what spiritual consciousness is, we need to survey the landscape of human consciousness and learn what spiritual consciousness isn't. We should begin by stating that consciousness does not really have different levels. Human beings have different levels of awareness of consciousness. When we talk about developing consciousness, we really mean expanding awareness of consciousness. The human experience in which we are all participating conforms to certain laws. One is that everything starts in the simplest form. Oak trees start as acorns, plants start as seeds, birds start as eggs, and animals start as babies. The universe itself started with the Big Bang. The solar system started with exploding stars. Conscious entities begin unaware, ignorant, and spend their lives learning. Everything begins simple and matures.
This is Deb. This is also true of human consciousness, individual and collective. Collective or universal human consciousness is simply the aggregate of all the individual human consciousnesses. Life on Earth began unconscious. Gradually, more advanced life types developed, enabling higher levels of consciousness. Eventually, human beings arrived with self-consciousness. Similarly, individual humans have, over a period of many lifetimes, gone through experiences which have slowly raised their level of consciousness, usually by using the time-tested technique of discovering, item by item, what doesn't work.
Especially human consciousness, control of ignorance, transcendence is a continuum. For our purposes, we will identify and talk about three distinct phases of the process: material, mental, and spiritual consciousness. We'll compare the concepts that define each level of consciousness with respect to matter, power, God, prayer, religion, mind, and feeling. Okay, this is Michelle. Material consciousness. Material consciousness is the lowest level of human consciousness. The great majority of humanity operates at this level. It's the long part of the path, beginning with little more than animal instincts.
This is Kevin. Matter. The material consciousness thinks matter is real, physical, external to itself, out there. The material concept of matter has grown more sophisticated over time. To the early Greeks, matter was made up of four elements: earth, water, fire, and air. Later they threw in ether to contain the other four. Later they threw in ether to contain the other four. Now there are over 100 elements on the periodic chart. Science's concept of these elements has changed from little hard particles flying around each other to waves, to probability clouds, to something with characteristics of all of these. No doubt we'll move on, but what defines material consciousness is the belief that matter has an external reality governed by the laws of physics.
So it's exactly what we think a material concept matter is.
Power. In material consciousness, power is a physical force. Human beings think in terms of overcoming, using more powerful forces to overcome lesser forces. We probably began with rocks, sticks, and clubs. Spears overcame sticks and clubs. Then someone invented the bow and arrow and was able to overcome the spear carriers. Then, in turn, were overcome by guns. We moved on to cannons, then to bombs, with airplanes to deliver them, then atomic bombs, then hydrogen bombs. Each more powerful force was invented to overcome the previous power, usually to bring peace. We can take a look at world today to see how effective this approach has been.
There are other things which have power in material consciousness: germs, viruses, drugs, weather, financial trends, politics, armies, bullets. Human beings spend billions of dollars every year developing new, better powers to overcome them. The way human beings try to get what they want, whether it's peace, prosperity, or someone else's property, is to find a bigger, better force.
God. This is Marianne. Concepts of God, which we talked about emptying out in the previous chapter, are those held by material consciousnesses. Material concepts of God usually involve an anthropomorphic being with specific powers which are effective in the material world. God potentially can give us something, remove something from us, or overcome something we think needs to be overcome. Beings at the material level of consciousness have gods which are simply another step in the process of finding a greater power with which to overcome.
This is Diane. Prayer. And prayer, of course, is the attempt to use the God power to get, remove, or overcome whatever we find ourselves unhappy about. Materialistic prayers usually involve informing God of what we feel it has been overlooking or neglecting, and finding the right words or rituals to influence it to correct the situation. This type of prayer implies certain characteristics of God that most prefer to ignore. A God that can be influenced to give something must be currently withholding it. A God that can be talked into removing something must be currently allowing it to remain. A God that could overcome something must be currently permitting it to be as it is, or that God must be unaware of those things.
This is Lori. Religion, materialistic religions focus on intercession with the powers separate from the devotees. Most primitive and orthodox religions are materialistic. Materialistic religions typically involve such things as rites, idols, and ceremonies. They tend to have dogmas, doctrines, and rules to be adhered to by the followers. They usually involve priest classes to intercede with the gods or gods for their members. They are often political and self-serving. They often keep their membership through promises of rewards and punishments to be awarded in the future. They function as intermediaries between the worshippers and the worshipped. They do not focus on raising the level of the members' consciousness or bringing the members to their own religious experience.
This is Tree. Supply. The material concept of supply is income and possessions, including dollars, stocks, and bonds, food, clothing, companionship, jobs. Material human consciousness believes supply comes from out there and is limited. What one has, another can't have, and there's not enough for everybody. This leads to the very human concern with self-preservation, taking care of ourselves, often at the expense of others. Getting ours before someone else gets it, being cleverer than the others, and competing with 6 billion other human beings for our supply. A very stressful way of life. Stress is a sure sign of a material consciousness.
Adele, healing. The material concept of healing is doctors, medications, surgeries, cures, germs and virus-caused diseases, shots, vaccinations, and drugs to cure them. It's about applying the power of medicine to overcome the power of disease. We apply our best medical solutions to our medical problems.
200 years ago, medicine was ignorant and limited, doing all sorts of things considered wrong today, such as bleeding people to let evil spirits out. Now medicine is very sophisticated. The diagnostic equipment in the country is unsurpassed. Our capabilities are much greater. We now have very expensive drugs to treat almost everything. However, even with an increase in life expectancy, there is no significant reduction in the percentage of people who are sick. We've wiped out tuberculosis and now have AIDS, wiped out polio and now have chronic fatigue syndrome, lupus, etc. New diseases continually rise and new versions of old ones. The germs and viruses evolved to overcome the medicines that were invented to overcome them. The material approach to healing is just another attempt to overcome with material power. So material consciousness deals with what it thinks is an external reality of material things, powers, gods, problems, limitations, and separation.
Okay? Do we get what material consciousness is? You see how that's what runs society, how that's what's running the advertising world and television and sitcoms and books and most Orthodox religions and everything like that.
I'm curious how this relates to Christian Science. There's, I know this whole movement sort of came out of certain aspects of that, but I'm kind of ignorant of Christian Science. But this sounds, that what we just read sounds pretty Christian Scientific.
No, that's prior to Christian Science. That's more Orthodox. The next section in mental consciousness begins to get into Christian Science and religious science. Although Christian Science is really, most of the metaphysical churches are hybrids between mental and mystical consciousness. All right, now we're going fast. Cool. Let's do the next one.
Mental consciousness. Human consciousness gradually developed to the point at which the guy with the most powerful force didn't necessarily win because people started using intelligence. Strategy became involved. Sometimes a good intellect overcame a greater force. The use of the intellect has expanded into science, medicine, economics. But mental consciousness is not using the intellect to better apply material powers. Mental consciousness began when people became aware of the power of the mind. Places like Duke Parapsychology Laboratory have demonstrated that minds can move and control matter. They can, for example, roll dice in a particular way, but that's just the kindergarten level of what we're talking about.
The material level of consciousness is associated with matter and the laws of physics. The mental level of consciousness is associated with mind and the laws of metaphysics. The prefix meta means beyond, transcending, more comprehensive. Metaphysics means transcending the physical laws of matter and energy. The mental state of consciousness transcends the material state of consciousness as metaphysics transcends physics.
Did you hear that?
The metaphysical church movement began in the second half of the 19th century as people like Mary Baker Eddy revealed and began to demonstrate the power of mind, and especially the healing power. These people discovered that the material world is contained within mind, that mind controls matter. In fact, that matter is an expression of mind within mind. The metaphysical churches demonstrated that mind creates our experience of matter, and that mind can be used to transform matter. The Christian Science Church in Mrs. Eddy's time had 3,000 congregations and 15,000 practitioners who used mental consciousness to heal all varieties of physical ailments. The size of the movement testifies to the effectiveness of the power of the mind.
This is Jim. One of Joel's students went within and asked, "What is mind?" The answer she received was, "You're looking at it." It was saying that everything that we are aware of through our senses is in our mind. What we call space is mind. We can think of mind as a bubble in which this human experience is taking place, not unlike the dream bubbles created by our individual consciousnesses when we sleep. For people who haven't encountered this concept before, it can be very difficult. Mental consciousness sounds like nonsense to those who are immersed in material consciousness. We will walk through the 7 topics that we covered in the material consciousness to give a clear idea of mental consciousness.
Any questions?
This is Tricia. Mental consciousness realizes that matter is formed by mind within itself, within the time-space bubble which it is. Matter is one form of mind. Thoughts are another form, like ice. Water and steam are 3 forms of H2O. Mind functions as thought. Mind appears as matter. The content of mind is perceived by our 5 senses as matter. Metaphysics is the science which describes the nature of matter as mind. And the behavior of matter is conforming to laws believed in mind. Mind is both the cause and the substance of matter.
Yeah, got your hands up now.
Yeah, I'm real. I'm just confused. I'll get you.
You don't get what?
The Matter is formed by mind within itself. Matter is formed by mind.
Okay, this is we are now at the jumping off point. The best example that I keep coming back to, and I use it a lot in here, too much probably, is dreams. When I have a dream at night, this dream appears, I guess presumably in my subconsciousness, and it's like I refer to it as like a bubble appears inside my consciousness. Now, inside that dream, I may be in my dream, and I may be in touch with material stuff that I'm dreaming, okay? So I'm dreaming that I'm sitting at a table, and I'm dreaming that I can knock on the table, and I can hear it knock, and I can bruise my knuckles, okay? Now this is all taking place in my dream, within my mind. And the question is, what's the table in my dream made out of? Wood? Well, yeah. Not made out of wood. It's not made out of nothing. It's made out of mind. Right. So we have a table made out of mind within mind, appearing as matter. Okay? And I'm sitting in that dream and I'm thinking, darn, this table is hard, or gosh, this table is pretty. Okay? So now there's two forms of mind within my mind. There's the table form of mind, and there's also the this is pretty thought form of mind. So thoughts and tables are two forms of mind, two forms of the substance we can call mind within my dream. Okay? Now what the metaphysical churches are saying is that when I wake up in the morning, I am still looking at everything that I consider to be material, that everything that I think is material is also made out of mind and is within mind, that there is nothing out there. And I go back to my story about trying to prove that there was something out there in the previous chapter, when I said there was no way I could prove anything was out there because because my mind, because it's all just stuff going on in my mind. We're back to the same point. What this is saying is that, yeah, and there isn't. It's all in my mind. It's all in the mind. Is that clear?
It's like the screen of the movie screen.
Well, that's not quite the same analogy. I mean, yeah, it is, but...
not really happening. It's just weird. It's just in my mind.
Well, you don't need to add things like it's not really happening.
Church religious science says like this, the thought is the cause and the form acts through and creates form.
In mind.
In mind.
In mind.
Right.
And when I say, you don't have to say it's not really happening, it's as really happening as anything.
Right.
To the one in the dream, it was really happening. The dream was really happening to the one in the dream, and this is really happening to the one in this dream. And, so I'm not questioning your statement was right, except that I'm not sure what really happening means. That's where it breaks down.
So why are we having two different experiences, a dream state and then a wakeful dream state? I mean, what's this all about?
Beats me.
What's the purpose of going to sleep and then waking up and having another dream?
Well, what's the purpose of going to sleep and then waking up and not having a dream? Why is it any different whether this is a dream or not? How does that affect the purposefulness of it? What difference does it matter whether matter is real or in mind? It doesn't affect the purposefulness of it at all. Just a different way of thinking about it.
But I mean, isn't it that it's the five senses that solidify the thought and make our experience feel so real? Because you can see it, you can touch it, you can hear it, and it makes it feel so real.
Absolutely.
At the human level.
Absolutely. Right now and in my dream.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That's the problem. See, the problem is that I believe my body is real and that I believe my senses are reporting real information.
Right.
And like I pointed out in the previous chapter, there's no proof at all that my senses are providing real information. There's absolutely no evidence that my mind isn't making all of this up.
Yeah, because like intellectually, I get intellectually what we read about viral and sickness and disease, but when I am in the experience, like right now, and I have the feeling and the pain and the relief from the medication, it really grounds me in the human consciousness. You know, it's like, shit, you know? It's like, it's so hard to break free of it, you know?
Oh, yeah. Wait till we get to the 1 in 1,000 and the 1 in 1,000 of those and the 1 in 1,000 of those. Yeah, it's almost impossible to break it. But your experience is no different, whether it's conceived of as being an external reality that's really out there and has an independent existence, whether you're here or not, or whether you think of it as in your mind. That has no effect on it. You don't feel any less sick when you're perfectly healthy laying in your bed dreaming you're sick than you do now.
Okay.
The experience is no different. The experience doesn't matter on whether it's real, externally real or not. And the metaphysical religion is not saying that it doesn't exist. The metaphysical religion is really just saying that it's in your mind. A different order of reality. It's saying that the physical laws of science are not the governing thing. It's the laws of mind that are controlling matter, not the laws of matter. But in the absence of a powerful mind, the laws of matter appear to happen.
So the big thing for me is just the relation between cause and effect. It's not cause out there and I'm affected, it's cause here that's affected.
Mm-hmm.
So most of your life you're taught that you're happy because you have things, but now from metaphysics you're taught that if you change your thoughts, then you can affect that.
Mm-hmm. That's the reverse.
That's metaphysical.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So what I'm saying, if you can't prove that anything's out there, and it's all mind within mind, I don't even know if my experience matches yours at all.
That's right.
I've often
We could all be here just having a totally different experience of all of this.
No, you can't even say that.
Okay.
We're not even here. You're just having your dream.
That's true.
You're making us all up.
This is usually where I get to go to the bathroom.
Let's go on. We're going to get a lot deeper into this. Let's move on to power, and let's explore power in the mental level of consciousness. Who's next to read?
Do you think that phone people?
Huh?
What about people on the phone? Do they hear me? Or would they?
No, they're not hearing.
You don't exist.
What phone? They got their phones on mute and we can't hear them read anyway. Anybody out there want to read?
No.
They all hung out.
Who's next?
Power.
No, because I'm on AOL.
So there's the level of consciousness, the only power is mind. The power of mind over matter. By learning to use the power of mind, matter can be created, altered, or destroyed. For example, from the metaphysical viewpoint, the power of mind can be used to heal sickness. A belief in harmony or wellness in a strong enough mind can be used to heal sickness. Can overcome the weaker belief of disharmony. The great majority of humanity at the material level of consciousness believes that germs and viruses cause disease. A metaphysical practitioner with a strong enough mind can overcome the effect of the belief with her or his mind.
The thousands of healings brought about by the practitioners of the Christian Science Church prove that material powers, germs, virus, etc., are not powers in the presence of mental consciousness. We commonly see an example of the power of mind over matter in our bodies, although we seldom stop to realize it. When we become afraid, our bodies get ready to fight or run. This appears as increased heart rate, blood pressure, and adrenaline. fear, the trigger for this charge, is in the mind. Our problem with material power is that whenever we apply a material force, we may run into someone with a stronger force. The problem with mental power is that whenever we attempt to use mental power, we may run into someone with a stronger mind, or a group with a stronger mind. We also must continually overcome the conditioned false beliefs of the 6 billion who are exerting some level of mental power just by their common beliefs. Another problem is that mental power, like material power, can be used for any purpose, good or evil.
Yes. When this part here talked about a group can get together and overcome a disease through mental work, what is the difference between that and prayer?
None.
Okay. But prayer is considered part of the first reality we're talking about. We're talking about mental. Now, the first material consciousness.
In material consciousness, prayer is asking God to do something for you.
Okay.
Asking God to do something for you.
So this is just a different form?
If you have the fact is that the prayer groups do work. If the people who are praying believe they work. Whether or not there is the God they're praying to exists. Let's just back up a little bit.
Yeah.
Christian Science actually did have 3,000 congregations around the world, and they had 15,000 practitioners, and people were paying these people money like they pay doctors, going to their appointments and paying people to get healings. So it's real clear that there was a lot of healing going on in the Christian Science movement back then. And this was the application of mental power by people who had practiced and had the understanding and had the strength of belief to overcome the apparent physical power, material power of a flu virus, let's say. Okay?
But even that is overcoming. I don't think that's what they're really saying. It's like Joel, like he says, there's one power, and then you personalize, it's not about overcoming Aaron. And it's the same thing with church religious science. It's you don't come from.
But that's at the mystical level now.
Yeah.
When they're operating at the mental level, which a lot of them used to, like New Thought and like Unity.
Yeah.
And like
it's a fine line there between.
And like Christian Science before it became religious science. Yeah. There was, it's mental, and all we're trying to do is we're not looking at what particular religions do. We're trying to look at what mental power is. Now, when a bunch of people get together and pray for something to happen, and they believe it's going to happen, they're exerting mental power, and that manifests. And whatever they're praying for can happen.
Can happen, but people also die that get prayed for a lot by a lot of people.
Because the people don't really think it's going to work, because they don't really believe in God, because they haven't seen any evidence in their lives that God works.
Okay.
But if they were holy rolleration it up or something like that, it can happen.
So it's the state of the consciousness of the people who are doing the praying.
People who are praying or people who are doing the practitioner work.
Okay.
And the conviction behind their thoughts.
Yeah, sure.
They really believe them.
Or in the case of the mystical consciousness, the knowing. The power of a mystical healing is in knowing. There's no conviction at all. There's no faith. There's nothing at all. It's just knowing. But still, it takes a long time to develop the level of consciousness that's really effective.
And that was Jesus' consciousness, just knowing. And Joel's.
And Joel's. Yeah, Joel healed people before they got in touch with him. People used to send Joel a letter and get their healing before Joel got the letter. But they didn't get the healing before they nailed it.
Yeah.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah. Okay.
And mental is still dualistic, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
It's just
It's still overcoming.
different vehicle.
It's still a different power. It's a different power. The thing about human consciousness is using power to overcome.
Yeah.
That's what we do. And mental thing is using power to overcome.
Rather than asking God to intervene directly, we're using our mind to manifest it for us, or to have God manifest it for us.
But really what they did was, it wasn't prayer in a petition state. What it was is, and it wasn't referred to, it was prayer, but they called it spiritual mind treatment. And it was a specific type of prayer that They recognized God. They unified themselves with God. They realized the spiritual truth or the quality of God. They gave thanks, and then they released it to the universe, which was like saying, it's done. They believed it. That was the stage of conviction. So it's not prayer in the type of sense like...
We'll talk about that.
Yeah, oh God, please.
We'll talk about that in spiritual healing.
Yeah, it was an alignment it was an alignment with the powers that be, God, with what you want to call it, you know, just like Joel did.
That's very different. That's mystical level.
Right.
Spiritual level of healing, and that's very different from what we're talking about here. We're talking about the mental level of healing, and this includes, I'll probably get to this in another paragraph or two. Let's go on through this and then we can talk. Let's finish up the mental level, and we'll leave the mystical level for next time. But it also includes voodoo, and it includes witchcraft and sorcery and stuff like that is also mental healing, you know. And most prayer groups are mental healing.
You say mental healing is, you talk about stronger mind, it's really a stronger belief. I guess I'm getting, well, maybe I'm getting confused with mental and spiritual.
Well, I mean, stronger mind and stronger belief we're using interchangeably here. Actually, minds aren't strong. Minds reflect the strength of beliefs, but that would be true of mental. Somebody read about God. Who's next? Rob? You can be next.
Okay. God. In the metaphysical churches, God is sometimes called divine mind, the creator and sustainer of all that exists in mind. Of course, the application of both material and mental powers does not require a God. Mental healings, for example, are demonstrations of the power of mind, not of something spiritual.
Prayer. Affirmations are a common use of mental power, which might be considered as mental prayer. This idea is that affirming something which isn't currently true in our experience exerts mental power which will cause it to become true. Having a positive attitude is an effective example of this. Visualizing abundance or good outcomes of future endeavors are other examples of that work for some people.
Most prayer groups are really examples of mental prayer. Joel talks about a preacher who wrote a book on how to use prayer for good and evil. He had two identical collections of plants in identical situations. He had one group of people pray for one collection to be healthy and beautiful, and another group prayed for the other plants to die. The plants that were being prayed for positively exhibited unusually good growth, and the others did die. Joel comments that the experiment accurately recorded reproducible results, but the results were misinterpreted. God certainly does not kill plants, part of its own creation. At the whimsy of a group of people who pray, prayer cannot be used destructively. The experiment did, however, demonstrate that the mental power generated by the prayers affected the plants. Another form of prayer in mental consciousness is called treatment. Since it's usually associated with healing, we'll discuss it there.
Okay, so that covers prayer groups.
Religion. The mental religions include most of the metaphysical religions, such as Christian Science, although some of them do rise into spiritual consciousness as well. These movements gain recognition because of the success of their healing activities. There are numerous other examples of mental religions. Voodoo practitioners can kill or heal with their minds. Notice that voodoo works best on people who believe in voodoo. Voodoo works. In Hawaii, there were good kahunas who would heal and bad kahunas who could curse and kill. Mental power is also the foundation of witchcraft, wizardry, and sorcery. Many primitive races, like the Aborigines in Australia, knew much more about the mind than we do today. The Aborigines could point a stick or finger at someone and kill them.
Sharp stick.
No, that's the spear chucker's packet material. Go ahead.
Healing. There's been a great deal of effective mental healing done by practitioners of several of the metaphysical religions. Practitioners often use the term treatment for the mental practice of knowing the truth and directing it at the patient to bring about healing. Often it involves phrases beginning with "you are." It is similar to affirmation. Using hypnosis is another example of mental healing. The power of the hypnotist's mind is used to affect the patient's body through the patient's mind. There are numerous studies of the ability of the human mind to control the body, stopping bleeding, for example, or controlling the pulse or the brain waves. Biofeedback is another tool that helps develop mental healing capabilities.
And as we saw above, prayer groups work. The beliefs of a group of people and the power of their prayer constitute an effective mental power. The healing agent is the powering mind of the believers, not the prayer. A large enough prayer group will have the same effect on its subject as the praying groups had on the plants. Psychosomatic healing is another example of mental healing, as in the use of placebos, which demonstrate the power of mind.
Supply. The mental concept of gaining supply is using mind to manifest material supply. Instead of trying to go out there and get material supply before others get it, we use the power of mind to create or attract it. Practitioners of the metaphysical religions may be called for help with things like supply or employment as well as healing. Affirmations are also used to manifest supply.
Please observe that both mental and material consciousness involves the use of powers, and one of the things that we have to empty out before we can attain spiritual consciousness is the belief in more than one power. In fact, material and mental consciousness are both human rather than spiritual states of consciousness. A spiritual being that's having a human experience is a spiritual being that is now living at the material or mental level of consciousness. Part of the process of rediscovering that we're spiritual beings is learning to recognize and rise above material and mental consciousness.
I think we'll stop there tonight, but let's have any discussion if we want to on questions about material or mental levels of consciousness. Anything?
Is these three levels, the material, mental, and the spiritual, the same thing as what it's referred to and what I've heard in a lot of the read and heard in some of the Joel tapes is the first, second, and third degree? Is that basically the same thing?
I don't know.
What
you're talking about.
I've heard it described like in those terms, like trying to give an example here where I've heard that, where it's giving a lesson on in the first degree. Like I'm just wondering if that correlates to material consciousness or the second degree. I guess.
Probably not. He
Oh, okay.
doesn't spend any time at all talking about material consciousness.
Oh, okay.
He's not interested in that. In fact, he doesn't spend much time talking about mental consciousness. Joel's teaching is, he's teaching the attainment of mystical consciousness. Yeah.
Could you say that everyone in this room is already enlightened? Because I've heard, I don't remember which teacher it was, said that you are, you are all already enlightened, but you just don't know that you are.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Sure.
okay, and so if everyone in this room is already enlightened, then the material consciousness that's going on, that's how it's not real, is that we're all really up there somewhere. We're not real wise, we're all really up there somewhere as enlightenment, and that's how materiality is not real.
Now,
or a dream.
when people say that everybody in this room is already enlightened, we'll see, it's always a matter.
I think they're done.
You guys done with us? Okay. I think we just got hung up on.
That's those feelings.
Now, the difficulty is what level you're talking at. The people, yeah, the one in your dream, when you're having a dream at night, the one in the dream thinks it's real, okay? That one is not enlightened. So, those of us following the one that's in the dream is not enlightened. The one that's in the dream is the personal sense. All the people in this room, we're all in the personal sense, and we're not enlightened. But we're not the reality. So the ones who are not enlightened aren't here. So you see how it's kind of where you're talking? If you look at the fact that we're spiritual beings having a human experience, okay? The spiritual being is enlightened. It's unchanging. It's eternal. It's outside of time. And we'll talk about this later on. That one is enlightened. That one is the enlightened one. That is the one consciousness, the one existence. Okay? That's enlightened. And in that sense, everybody is enlightened. And in that sense, the one who believes it's unenlightened doesn't even exist. So from that viewpoint, it's difficult to say that the ones who believe that they're unenlightened really are enlightened. Because no, they really aren't. They really aren't anything. They aren't enlightened or unenlightened.
We gotta get to shoot the one that hurts so much.
Doesn't exist.
We're all perfect, whole, and complete, but you don't know it. If you knew you were perfect, whole, and complete, then you would be enlightened.
You'd be home watching TV.
That's the whole idea, I think, is to awaken from the dream and to realize that your true nature. It's all within us, we're perfect, but our conscious mind, our dualistic mind, our ego was created, and now we're trying to get rid of that. And I shouldn't say trying to get rid of it, because then you're trying to...
Yeah, we are, but
we're attached to this human that it becomes very painful.
And I so relate it even more, because I know that when I'm in that part, well, it's not even suffering. I don't know that I suffer as I did before. But when I'm in the pain of the physical pain, it's very difficult to say there's none of that going on, because
sure.
I experienced it.
Of course it is. Yes.
And it's not even that, I don't have the story going on anymore. Oh, it always was going to be like this. There's no story anymore. But it's just, I experienced physical discomfort.
Yep.
So it's very difficult.
Mm-hmm. I understand, that's true.
And when you're feeling good, it's a whole lot easier to believe in, the concepts.
Although, but neither one's,
Yeah.
But there's no difference.
No, I understand. Yeah, I know. Yeah, that's the whole, it's the duality, but
There's just no difference between believing you're sick and believing you're well. It's still the one who's believing they're sick or well is the problem.
Because I was thinking about sitting with Robert, who had Parkinson's disease. His body did. And if you looked at it, it didn't look healthy, well, happy, not suffering, but yet he wasn't. Because he didn't believe that he was the body, right?
No, yeah, I
He knew he wasn't.
He knew he wasn't. So that was the appearance that his body was going through, but he was
To us.
to us.
Not to him.
Right.
But he has no relationship to that body at all. He was not at all confused by his.
Right. So that's the ultimate state.
He wasn't in pain?
No, not at all.
Not at all.
Yeah, I was around.
I was around him too.
The body was in pain.
Yeah.
The body appeared to be in pain. The Sargadata used to say that. They say, "Are you in a lot of pain?" The Sargadata, and he would say, "There is pain." But it had nothing to do with him, see.
So is it still your attachment to the body that causes you the pain?
The attachment to the body causes you to think you're in pain.
Okay, well, remember we were talking the other day and I said, okay, my body is in my state of consciousness, okay? So if I am experiencing the pain, then I still believe that the body has power over me.
Yes.
That it's the body's running me, I'm not running the body.
But like Osho, he was like outside of his body, looking at his body a lot of the time.
Sure.
So he could lose a finger or an arm, and you might feel pain, right? But it wouldn't.
The body,
You would see the pain.
we can't talk about it. The body feels pain. But he's not associated with that. Roberts told me point blank that when you're not identified with the body, then you're only aware of perhaps the pain to a tenth of the amount that somebody else would be who was focused on it. You know? For example, I get headaches now and then. And I have a headache that starts back here and comes out my temple, and it's really piercing, okay? And for long times, I forget about it. And then all of a sudden, I realize, oh, it's still there, okay? Now, where was it when I was forgetting about it? If I'm focused on my headache, then I have a headache. And if I'm focused completely on something else, I don't have a headache. Okay? And there's no difference in the physiology at all.
Mind forms whatever is given.
So the way I understand it is that who is the I that feels the pain?
That's the
You know,
question.
because when I'm in a place, and I only feel it sometimes when I'm in meditation, I know that self doesn't feel the pain. That's the self. And so the I that feels the pain, that's that question that Robert asked.
Sure.
And he always knew that he was the self.
Yeah, he never thought he was that body. But Robert was really weird.
Yeah.
He sometimes forgot to run his blood pressure too, you know. Sometimes his blood pressure would go to 0/0. And he didn't die.
He looked that way through meditation, 0/0.
So, and back to the cause of the suffering, it's the I thought. Robert's exactly right. I mean, it's nice to talk about ego and ignorance and attraction and aversion and all that sort of stuff, but it's the I thought. Little I with a little I thought. That's the problem, okay? The fact that I think I'm this body-mind mechanism rather than the consciousness which happens to be appearing in this body-mind mechanism. Now, do you see that Robert would say that, well, I'll say it, the consciousness that's appearing in this body-mind mechanism is exactly the same consciousness that's appearing in that body-mind mechanism, okay? It's just two different places, two different points in space-time that same consciousness is apparently appearing. Now, is that consciousness male or female?
Neither.
Bingo. Is it sick or well?
Neither.
Okay. But if I happen to get personal and think that I'm the thoughts not the awareness, but the thoughts. If I happen to get personal and think I'm the thoughts, then I'm locked into this body and I think I'm male and I'm sick or well and have a headache or I don't. But that's nonsense. We'll get here. This is all going to get covered. But the consciousness that I am, the awareness that I am, is the same awareness that you are. Okay? As the life in one branch of a tree is the same life as the life in another branch of the tree. You know, the consciousness that I am is exactly the same consciousness that you are. And it's eternal, and it's the same consciousness I was when I was 12, and it's the same consciousness I was in my previous life, and it's the same consciousness I was when I was an amoeba, you know, and it's the same consciousness I am as half-dome granite in Yosemite right now. It's the same consciousness, okay? And it's not sick.
And that's how Joel could do the healings without you even being there, because he was that one consciousness and recognition.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, so. But by sending Joel a letter, you reached out to Joel and you touched his consciousness. Mm-hmm. And in touching his consciousness, you got lifted.
Which is your consciousness.
Which is your consciousness.
But it's both sides.
Right, right. I understand
Which
that.
is already there, which is already omnipresent. So the minute you reached out to Joel, you touched his consciousness, which is omnipresent. And got immediately lifted to what Joel saw, which is that, no, that's not my body either. You know. No, that ain't me either.
Roll one, it takes air. One.
Let's get quiet for a second. Okay, see you next week. Thanks for coming. Love you.